plaintiff in Brown versus Board of Education, as well as two of my great aunts were plaintiffs. My dad was actually out of school for all 5 years when schools were closed, in 1959 and 1964. He was 6 when the schools closed down in 1959, and then we went back, he was 11 years old. Luckily, he graduated high school at age 22, but he was the same age as his high school geometry teacher.
All right, so why did Barbara organize the students to strike?
Not because of integration, but equality.
Yeah, for equality. So schools back then, they were supposed to be separate but equal. And so what that means is African Americans were supposed to be separate from whites in the schools, but they were supposed to at least have equal facilities in terms of like they should both have gyms and cafeterias. But since the school that Barbara went to didn't have all of those amenities, that's why they organized the strike. So just write down some of those. We talked about the problems or that they didn't have some of those amenities. What state was Barbara's school located?
Virginia.
Virginia, yeah, it was in Farmville, which is only about 45 minutes away. And you were saying you went there and visited the museum that's there now, right?
Yeah.
A couple days ago. So yeah, they have a really cool museum that's there now. You can check it out, and it's, I believe it's actually in the old school building. So it's just kind of a tribute to not only Barbara Johns, but also all the other students there. Because it was a big deal for them to basically refuse the schooling that they were given. And then they actually didn't even have school for like the next 6 years after that. So it was a very hard time, but ended up a lot of good things coming out of a result of their protest. And then the last question, what was your Supreme Court case called? Adriana?
Brown versus the Board of Education.
Yes, Brown versus Board of Education. So make sure you get those 4 things down up here. Alright, and then we didn't quite get through this yesterday. Who wasn't here yesterday? Anyone not here? Alright. What? They can get all kinds. Alright, so where did we leave off? I think we finished with the Germany column. I think that's right. Who else needs one? You want to use? Just because they just have like cafeteria. Please quiet. Anyone else need a paper from yesterday? Alright, on your warm-ups, you need to also, we have who were the 4 dictators we talked about and what type of government did they use. So you guys should have this on your sheet. We're going to talk about a couple more, but while we're talking about them, make sure you write them down. What? Yeah, that's what you need. So, first, we talked about yesterday, we talked about Joseph Stalin. The type of government was totalitarian and communistic. So get both of those down. We talked about Adolf Hitler and Nazi Germany. That was the type of government they had. Yes, Vicky.
Do I just have to write this? No.
If you have a question, raise your hand. Alright, so we left off with Italy yesterday, and they have a leader named Benito Mussolini, which sounds very Italian. And the type of government they had was fascism. So we'll talk a little bit more about that today, and it'll be in the video, but fascism is basically where you have a country where the needs of the country are greater than the needs of the individual, which is very different than what we have here in America, because oftentimes in America, we like to think about our own problems and kind of the things we're facing, try to change it that way. But in a fascist country, they'll think about what kind of problems is America as a whole having, and how do we fix that? And so the needs of the country are greater than the needs of the individual. List of major events. They were also in the Axis powers, as we talked about yesterday, but they also invaded Ethiopia because they just thought they could. Who wasn't here yesterday? Huh? Just make it y'all pass. Alright, so make sure you guys have those down. We're gonna move on to Japan. Japan, they had 2 leaders. The first one was Emperor Hirohito. I'm sure I'm butchering that, but at least it's not. But he was more, I guess, more of a figurehead. He didn't have any like real power. I mean, he had some, but basically, Hideki Toho had like the most power because he was in command of the military and what they did with their military. So he had a lot more power than the emperor. But Japan was also totalitarian. They were also militaristic, nationalistic, and imperialistic. So just have those 3 down for them. What they did before the formal start of World War II is they invaded China, and that was really their main interest going into it. Part of the Axis powers we talked about, took complete political control of Japan, helped start World War II. You guys at the front table, just keep it down a little bit. Alright, so being a new unit, we need to start your guys' new notebooks. So once you have all that down, get your Chromebooks out, go to today's announcement and click on the notebook so we can start it. Alright, who can name one of the 3 things you need to do when we start a new notebook? Adriana? What's that? Bookmark it. Alright, good. Bookmark one. Put your name on it where? Yeah, put it in the title of it where it says student copy. Aiden. And where's the other spot we need to put our name? Yeah, just on the front page of the slide. So go ahead and do that. Take a minute to fill out your author slide too. Please do that, because if you don't do it, that's just automatically minus points. So it's important that you do it. I'll give you guys a couple minutes to do that real quick. Don't worry if you're not done yet. We'll probably have some time at the end of class where you can finish that part up. But now we're gonna start to get into the causes of World War II. We talked a lot about the different dictators yesterday. But before we do that, we talked about, there was an acronym we talked about for World War I for the four main causes of it. Does anyone remember what the acronym was? I just said it actually, Maine was the acronym for it. So can anyone say what one of the four reasons was?
Militarism.
Militarism,
Nationalism.
nationalism,
Imperialism.
someone say imperialism? Very good, yes, that was one of them. What was A? Anyone got A? Alliances, very good. So, those four reasons, although it's different for World War II, those also contribute to World War II. So, oftentimes we think of World War II and World War I as like two completely separate events, and they were two different wars for sure, but World War I had a lot to do with World War II. World War II probably wouldn't have happened or wouldn't have been the way it was without World War I. And specifically, we talk about the World War I debt owed by Germany. So Germany was in a very dire situation with their debt and with the economic status that they were in. So that was one of the causes, one of the economic causes. The other one was a worldwide depression. So we just talked about the Great Depression here in America, but the Depression also affected the entire world. Like, America wasn't the only place where younger people were having to work or get kicked out of their homes. This was happening around the world. And so was high inflation and the massive unemployment that they had. So we're gonna watch a quick video about the economic causes of World War II. Just go ahead. For the people that weren't here yesterday, I should have given you guys all that ABC sheet. And for those of you who were, make sure you get that out. And try to finish it up today. I'll help you guys with a couple of them. Go ahead and take that sheet out. And what did you say? Yeah, we just started it. Just go to today's announcements. Yeah. I'll make it nice.
I need one of those.
Aiden, yes.
I need one of those.
The ABC papers? Oh yeah, I'll end it. So basically with these, you're just gonna write two things for each letter that has to do with World War II, like a name or a place. If Zeke has some, you can copy some of his down. Alright, so we're gonna watch a video. When we're watching this video, just keep filling that out, but also think about why these are economic reasons as opposed to political or anything else.
World War I leads to World War II as day follows night. By the end of World War I, everybody is looking to get advanced.
World War I didn't really end in 1918. It brutalized an entire generation of Europeans. It brutalized an entire generation of people around the world. And it made them realize that war on this scale was not only possible, but actually thinkable.
There's a wonderful, wonderful political cartoon where the fat politicians and generals are walking out of Versailles, and there's a little tiny boy, and he's crying in the corner. And I'm not kidding, he says, "I'm cannon fodder for 1940. They knew, anyone with half a brain knew that the Treaty of Versailles was essentially the starting gun for the Second World War.
Essentially what happened is that you create such an unstable economy and so much animosity between nations that you're just seeding the field of war to rise and grow again.
A lot of the anger, animosity, resentment that fuels the rise of the National Socialists and Adolf Hitler in Germany can be directly tied to that. It would be difficult to argue that that's simply propaganda that's utilized by Adolf Hitler. These were very difficult terms for the German people to handle. And it creates this bunker mentality, this us against the world mentality that ultimately will play out in Hitler being able to create a program that appeals to that sentiment.
To the average German, they have been sold out by the politicians.
In particular, it made people like Adolf Hitler, who had fought, after all, in the German army in World War I.
Go ahead and close your Chromebooks right now too. You don't need them for the next couple of slides.
Think that if only the Germans could do it again, but do it right this time, they could actually win.
We call it World War I, World War II, but it's really two different stages of one global conflict. Just happens that people put their arms down for a 20-year period, and then they went back to fighting again.
Alright, so, what did you guys pick up on about the political causes there? Anything interesting of note? Patrick, you got one? Just stretching. Anyone got anything? That's okay. I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory on the slide. These were kind of the main points that I talked about in the video. Just key in on the difference between these, and the next couple of slides, there'll be kind of like a drag and drop thing for you guys to do. But next, we are going to talk about the political causes of it. And right here, you can see Mr. Nelson's acronym that he uses, JIG. He likes to say that these three countries were all on the same jig, or in the same rhythm, because it's basically like these three countries and the smaller countries that came out of them versus the rest of the world. So you really need to know, yesterday we talked about these three, Japan, Italy, Germany. Those are the Axis powers. These countries share a lot of beliefs. They share, the fascist ideals, the very nationalistic ideals. They all have strong sense of national identity. However, they were also they weren't like best friends either. And really, Germany dragged these other two into the war. Maybe not dragged, but they were the ones that convinced the other two to become involved in the war. Because Germany was very much about dominating Europe. But they also needed support from another country in Europe and maybe Japan in the Pacific. So basically, Germany was the one that was really pushing to go to war. And they kind of convinced Japan and Italy to team along with them to really expand their territory. So we're gonna watch a quick video about the political causes now. Just keep filling out that ABC sheet as best as you can.
After roughly 20 years of peace, the world went to war for a second time. Welcome to WatchMojo.com, and today we'll be exploring how World War II began. The Second World War is considered a direct result of the First World War due to unresolved tensions and anger from that conflict. However, the Great Depression of the 1930s was another factor that led to bitterness and a shift in public attitudes towards strict dictatorships. World War I also facilitated the rise of Adolf Hitler and his Nazi Party. Hitler's allies in Italy and Japan also acted aggressively with the hope of expanding their territories. Hostilities by these countries towards the communism of the Soviet Union was just another factor that helped lead to war. In fact, a number of ideologies helped spark the war. Aggressive expansionism by countries like Germany and Italy, fascist dictatorships, and deep-seated racism were all considered contributing factors. This racism was mostly in Germany, where the Nazis believed the Aryan race was the master race and superior to the Slavic people. The countries that eventually formed the Allied alliance acted passively in the face of the Axis threat. This was partly out of sympathy, partly out of guilt because of the Treaty of Versailles that blamed the Germans for World War I, and partly because countries like Britain underestimated Hitler.
You can use Versailles for V, that's a good one for V. For X, you could do the Axis powers and just underline X. Versailles is VERSAILLES. Does anyone remember what that was? The Treaty of Versailles? Adriana?
Wasn't it at the end of World War I that named Germany?
Yeah, very good. So the Treaty of Versailles, like we talked a little bit about earlier, was what everyone signed after World War I that basically pinned a lot of the blame on Germany and gave them a lot of punishments, or reparations you might hear too. But yeah, so that's what the Treaty of Versailles. X and Z, don't worry about it. Axis powers, you can use that for one of them. Make sure you take it off of A if you use that though. We'll go over the other ones later. You got Q. I'd have to look at Mr. Nelson's sheet. I don't think so. Don't worry too much about those harder to get letters. We'll go over those together later. So don't worry about them too much. Any other questions? Basically, it should be enough just with the names of the country, the names of the people, things like appeasement, you could do that. I mean, you don't really wanna just put like anger down, cause that's, I mean, what does that have, I mean, there was anger in World War II, that's a little too broad, try to be more specific with it. Or if you say anger, maybe explain who was angry at who, something like that. Alright.
Meanwhile, the League of Nations proved itself ineffective in the fight to keep the peace. A few months after Japan withdrew from the League of Nations in 1933, Germany did the same. In 1935, Germany violated the Treaty of Versailles by introducing mandatory military conscription and by beginning rearmament. That country continued to violate the treaty in the years that followed. In fact, in 1936, Hitler remilitarized the Rhineland. It was around this time Nazi Germany formed their important alliance with Italy. Soon after, the two countries offered support to the separatist movement in the Spanish Civil War, while the existing government was supported by the Soviet Union. These events foreshadowed the Second World War, as both sides were testing different methods and weapons of battle. One specific event that foretold the horrors of World War II was the April 1937 bombing of Guernica. By 1938, Hitler's motives were clearer. In a move referred to as the Anschluss, the Nazis annexed Austria into Germany, despite the fact this also violated the Treaty of Versailles. Later that year, Hitler was appeased by both Britain and France when they signed the Munich Agreement. This allowed Hitler to overtake a German-speaking section of Czechoslovakia in order to keep the peace.
I'd say you can use Czechoslovakia for Z if you want, because that's like CZ. You can say violet, yeah. Czechoslovakia, I think, is C, Z, E, C, H, O, S, L, O, V, A, K, I, A.
It's spelled similar to Czech Republic, right?
Yeah, you can also say that. It's still up there. If you guys didn't get that, just look it up later. It's fine.
In August 1939, Nazi Germany signed a peace treaty with the Soviet Union. However, the first official event of World War II followed soon after. Due to long-standing tensions, Germany invaded Poland on September 1st, 1939. Britain and France warned Germany that should the troops not withdraw, war was imminent. When the Nazis did nothing, Britain and France declared war on Germany, and World War II officially began.
Nice. Alright. Talked about political reasons. Now we're going to talk a little bit more specifically about each of the leaders. Some of the ones we talked about yesterday. So, we talked about fascism. Who can describe in their own words what fascism is? We talked a little bit about it. Go ahead.
When the government values like the country's problems over the individual people's problems.
Yes, very good. So when the matters of the state are valued more highly than the matters of the individual people in the state. These are some other characteristics of it. It's a strong central government. It's usually headed by a dictator in a single party system. That's how they start to get total control. And really what they do is they kind of stomp out any opposition. Like there's no one, there are people that oppose them, but they do a good job of controlling that. And then these three right here are also typically characteristics of fascism. Not necessarily the definition, but throughout history, fascist countries usually also use discrimination and racism and terror. As we'll see with these three specifically, all three of these used all three of these methods, essentially. Hitler, you guys I'm sure have heard of the Holocaust and how that was very racist and discriminatory, but Japan and Italy were the same way, just to a lesser extent, but they still killed millions of their own citizens, and so it wasn't, it's just not much, it's not better at all, it's still a horrible situation. So, we're gonna watch a couple videos and read an article about these two leaders. Does anyone have any questions before we start the video? You guys may see, especially with the video that Hitler's in, you may see them doing weird motions with their arms or saying things like "Hail Hitler," but please refrain from saying that or doing that, as it's just disrespectful and looks really bad. You get a lot of trouble if you do that in or out of the school setting. So I know it looks silly, but just try not to do it or make fun of it or anything.
Adolf Hitler was a fanatical leader, a megalomaniac who led his country and many others into the abyss.
Some historians believe that Adolf Hitler thought that his mission in life was to rid the world of Jews. That even if he didn't build the Third Reich for 1,000 years, he would be celebrating for eliminating the Jewish population from the world. I don't know how you begin to deal with that kind of madness, but that's who he was.
Adolf Hitler was born in Braunau am Inn, Austria, on April 20th, 1889. Hitler's childhood was an uneasy one. His father died when he was very young, and he was not a good student.
In his teen years, in his pre-war Viennese life, you start seeing the attractions to the anti-Semitic and rabid anti-Bolshevik attitudes.
So his name was not Adolf Hitler, it was Strickelberger, and he was a corporal in World War I. But simply, he was the man who was giving voice to a long history of German pride. The consequences of World War I for Germany were extraordinary. I mean, the victors, the Western Alliance, placed such penalties on them that they could barely survive. And so they were open to the idea of someone like Hitler, who could give voice to their most base fears, and he very cannily knew just how to do that.
Hitler, very quickly after the World War I, began to engage in political activity, joining and helping start the German Workers' Party in 1919.
This party later became the Nazi Party.
In 1923, Adolf Hitler conspired with other right-wing politicians to overthrow the Republic.
In response to this, Hitler was sentenced to prison, where he wrote Mein Kampf, expressing his radical, rabid beliefs.
He was irrationally anti-Semitic, and he was able to use anti-Semitism as a tool for his rise to power.
In January of 1933, Hitler becomes chancellor. As a result of the fire of the Reichstag in February of 1933, Hitler is afforded wide-ranging police and political powers. He's able really to begin the process of forging the dictatorship, the totalitarian state.
People who thought about international policy.
So with Hitler, we can see like he wasn't necessarily, when he was first getting on the political scene, it wasn't just like his hatred for Jewish people that was like appealing to people. What really happened first was he was able to rally people around the fact that they were angry at the rest of the world because of World War I. And that's how he was able to build a strong base and a strong new German identity. And then once he kind of gained that power, he was able to also implement his anti-Semitic beliefs. And so it wasn't, he appealed people initially more with his politics and less his actual beliefs, if that makes sense.
Were very concerned about what Adolf Hitler was up to. Because you would see those great rallies in the streets of Berlin with hundreds of thousands of people marching in uniform and goose-stepping their way down the Platz and raising their arms in salute to Adolf Hitler. And then he invaded Poland.
He thought the British and French would not declare war on him, and it would be a quick campaign to subdue Poland. But on September 3rd, 1939, Britain declared war. France followed suit.
In June 1941, Hitler invaded the Soviet Union, starting the largest land war in history. In December 1941, Hitler also declared war on the United States.
World War II was fought on 6 of the 7 continents. 50 million people perished. The United States, Great Britain, and the Western Allies were aligned with Russia to try
Western Allies, you could do that one for W.
Italy and Japan.
Hitler felt adamant that it was his duty to mankind to rid the world of all Jews, and he ordered all possible resources and manpower to fulfill this horrendous task in the so-called concentration camps, the death camps.
The Allied invasion of Normandy on June 6, 1944, marked the turning point of the war. In less than a year, Germany would surrender to the Allies. An estimated 6 million Jews were killed during World War II.
In May of 1945, Adolf Hitler committed suicide, together with his wife Eva Braun, who he married just before that.
I think of all the tyrants in history, you have to put Adolf Hitler right at the top. He almost destroyed civilization as we know it during the 20th century. I don't think that history will ever forgive him, or should it. We'll be endlessly fascinated by what A drove him, and B, why the German people decided to follow him.
Okay, so clearly a big part of World War II, but there were some other people who are also played key roles. Does anyone have any questions about that? Not seeing anything or anything. Alright, so next we're gonna watch a video about Benito Mussolini, the leader of Italy. And you'll see a lot of similarities between him and Hitler and kind of
As
their
Joseph
uprising.
Stalin established firm control over the Soviet Union, another dictator rose to power in Europe. Who was Benito Mussolini? What type of government did he implement? During the 1920s, Benito Mussolini established a totalitarian regime in Italy. A powerful and persuasive speaker, Mussolini played on public dissatisfaction with high unemployment, inflation, and frequent labor strikes, as well as fear of communist influence in politics. Mussolini took advantage of the unstable situation by appealing to Italy's wounded national pride. He won the support of many Italians by promising to address the economic suffering and the threats posed by communism. In 1921, Mussolini established the Fascist Party. Fascism is a political ideology that stresses extreme nationalism and places the interest of the nation above that of the individual. Fascism also emphasizes the need for a strong leader with the power necessary to address and eliminate the nation's problems. In October of 1922, Mussolini led 30,000 of his followers, known as Black Shirts, in an event known as the March on Rome. When many of the police, military, and government officials refused to stop the movement, the Italian king appointed Mussolini to lead the government. Rather than using the title of Prime Minister, Mussolini referred to himself as Il Duce, meaning the leader. Mussolini was granted emergency powers that were to last for only 1 year, but in doing so, the Italian parliament unknowingly established a dictatorship that would last for the next 20 years. Unlike Stalin, who used harsh methods to maintain control over his people, Mussolini sought to win public support. Mussolini praised the Italian people and their past, stirring up emotions by adopting much of the imagery of the Roman Empire. Mussolini glorified the nation's workers and the middle class, while promising to restore Italy to its former position as a world power. Under fascist rule, Italy had a balanced budget, inflation was eliminated, and the railway system was modernized. However, much of the success stemmed from the fact that Mussolini silenced his opposition. Opposing political parties were disbanded, while the press, radio, and film were used to distribute a ceaseless flow of propaganda. Over time, the fascists extended their control to every aspect of Italian life. The school system was used to indoctrinate children in the fascist ideology. Students wore black uniforms, and the concepts of discipline, duty, and obedience were emphasized. Mussolini also hoped to enhance Italy's role on the world stage and preached that it was natural for strong nations to conquer weak ones. Ethiopia, one of the few remaining independent nations in Africa, became his first target. Haile Selassie, the Emperor of Ethiopia, pleaded with the League of Nations for support as thousands of Italian soldiers prepared to invade in 1935. The League of Nations responded with a modest economic boycott of Italy and offered no military assistance as Selassie was forced to flee. Ethiopia was conquered and officially annexed by Mussolini in May 1936.
Very good. Alright, so next we're gonna read an article for the last guy. Does anyone wanna read first paragraph? Alright, yeah, let me make it a little bit bigger here. Alright, go ahead. What'd you say? Oh, I'm not sure what I thought. Go ahead though.
In the 1930s, Japanese fought in the Sino-Japanese War. In March 1937, he was promoted to Chief of Staff of the Army, whereby he led the military operations against the Chinese in Inner Mongolia about July 1940. He was the Prime Minister of War to the Japanese government. Europe's alliance with Germany and Italy against the Allied forces.
Good. Alright, who wants to read the next paragraph? Adriana?
Tojo became Prime Minister in 1941 and within 2 months ordered a surprise attack on U.S. naval forces in Hawaii. The subject attack on Pearl Harbor was planned by Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto. During the course of the war, Tojo presided over numerous war crimes, including the massacre and starvation of civilians and prisoners of war.
Very good. So we see here that he wasn't the guy that planned the exact specifics of Pearl Harbor, but he was the man who ordered it. So when we think about how America got involved in the war, it was really due to this guy right here because he wanted a surprise attack on America. That's what Pearl Harbor was. Tojo served as the political and military leader of Japan until 1944 when he was demoted by Hirohito. Following his nation's surrender to the Allied powers in September 1945, he was arrested, convicted by the International Military Tribunal for the Far East in the Tokyo trials, sentenced to death, and hanged on December 23, 1948. It did not turn out very well for him, obviously. So, you guys, on the next slide, you can go ahead and get your Chromebooks out. Don't need to soft for it. We are going to go through and decide if these causes are political or if they are economic. That's why I was trying to hint at that earlier. Ladies in the back. So, for Benito Mussolini, what do we think for him? Is he a political cause or an economic cause?
Political.
Raise your hand, someone. Aaliyah?
Political.
Political, very good. So drag and drop his name to the political side. What about high inflation? See? What was that? Very good, yeah. The high inflation is economic cause. Alright, what about dictators? What do we think? Political, very good. Yeah, they are in charge of the politics of the country that they're the dictator of, so good. What about German World War I debt? Leah? Economic, very good. Has to deal with the money side of things. Worldwide depression. Economic, yeah. Does anyone remember what depression is or what are some of the characteristics of an economic depression? There's a couple that we talked about that are characteristic of a depression. Does anyone remember? We talked about the loss of jobs and how there's unemployment. We talked about how there's less spending. We talked about how there's high inflation. So you could do all of those things contribute to an economic depression. All right, what about unemployment? Political or economic?
Economic.
Yeah, very good. Fascism? Political, very good. What about this guy, Tojo? What side should he be on? Political, very good. And Hitler is also political, so put him on that side as well. I think You guys got just a couple minutes left, so finish that author page if you haven't yet. And fill in that ABC chart as much as you can